Hi, I'm Steve Warren. I'm one of the owners of SkillCare Corporation. I'd like to thank you very much for joining in on the partnership between SkillCare and Stanley. I'd like to give you a little background of SkillCare Corporation. We manufacture about 80% of our products, and I'd just like to talk a little bit about our manufacturing capabilities. We do major sewing, heat sealing, assembly, plastic building and bending, and assembly of products. Of the about 600 products that we manufacture, what we've done in this video is we've outlined those high volume products that are sold in the hospitals. For later videos, we'll focus on some of the other products that are also sold into the rehab market. When we talk about high volume products, unfortunately, those products at the highest volumes are based on cost. This is kind of an interesting theory I have. As the quality of the product goes up, the volume goes down. Probably with one exception when we get to the heel protectors. So our best cushions are not the ones that we sell the most of, but I'll give you a little bit of the theory behind some of the better cushions, because later on, after you kind of dig in more deeply into the hospitals and start meeting the therapists, they're looking for the better cushions. In a hospital, the purchasing is done mostly by the wound care nurse and the therapist, but it's the wound care nurse that creates the high volume, because a lot of our products, even though they're reusable, they're treated as disposables in the hospitals. It's not uncommon to sell hundreds and hundreds of a product per month into a hospital, since basically they're taken home by the residents. We have representatives in every state, and they're very product knowledgeable and highly motivated. We do not sell direct, and since they get same commission base no matter who or where they sell, you won't find any interference with sales. I prepared a lot of literature which you should have gotten by now as background information, but that's just a small sampling of what we have here. As we perform other videos, I'd like to send more literature to give you a little bit more in-depth information of the products. So for example, when we start talking about cushions, the gel cushions are probably the better cushions, but it's the air cushions that we get extremely high volume with. It's not uncommon to sell hundreds of cushions to one hospital per month, because the cushions are treated as disposables. We have a website, skil-care.com, and then on that website we make available the inserts and product literature. Everything is printable from your computer, but we could also provide catalogs. We have a line that's very, very similar to Posey line, but we've gone way beyond Posey over the years. But the only area where I think we fall a little short of Posey is we don't get involved in psychiatric restraints. And the reason for that is primarily because there's a high liability associated with those particular restraints. The one product that we do not have, but we have available and we sourced it, are the non-skid socks. And those are available, and there's kind of awaiting approval from your group. SkillCare will be adding to the line these tubular socks. You could see that you have the non-skid surface 360 degrees, and what I mean by tubular is that there are no seams. They will come in 5 different colors, as you can see, and in 2 different sizes. To the best of our knowledge, they mimic the Posey socks. It's possible Posey changes socks slightly, but they're pretty close to the Posey socks. They're very competitively priced and very, very high volume product. This video will be comprised of several sections, and the first one we'll start talking about cushions. I'd like to give you a little bit of the background of the theory of cushions. When we think of a wheelchair cushion, we think primarily of a product that prevents pressure sores. But equally as important, cushions really have a role in solving positioning problems. Most therapists believe that most of the ills can be solved by properly positioning a resident in a wheelchair. And if that resident was sitting on a wheelchair and you had a scale under the resident, roughly 80% of the weight would be shown on the scale. So, for example, it would read 160 pounds. Now, the question may be, where does the other weight go? Where do the 40 pounds go? And part of that is distributed throughout the arms, the legs, the back. So when we talk about a later product, you can see now that if you position a resident further back in a wheelchair, a lot of the force is being transferred from the coccyx area, which is very prone to pressure sores, to the back, which is less prone to pressure sores. So another factor would be cooling. And the theory is that if a cushion can reduce the temperature by 1 degree centigrade, you can reduce the propensity of getting pressure sores by 8 to 10%. And all these studies are available on the internet. Now we're going to talk about specific positioning products. And the first few products I'm going to show you are basically to give you a background of positioning, but quite frankly, these are not our high volume products. As I demonstrate a product, I'll call out whether it's high volume or it's really just shown for demonstration purposes. I'd like to just mention that we have covers available that are waterproof and they stretch. And the advantage of being stretched is you don't create shear forces or parallel forces. And we'll talk in about a minute about forces. This cover is an option, and in most cases in the hospital, they do buy the cushions without the covers. In long-term care, the covers are very popular. Okay, we can see on the top that pressure equals force divided by area. So what we're trying to do is optimize with a cushion is reduce the pressure. So one way is to reduce the force or increase the area. So the force happens to be the patient's weight. So let's use it as an example. If you have a 200-pound patient and they were sitting on a wheelchair, roughly speaking, 80% of that weight would be transferred to the seat area. And so where does that other 40 pounds go? It's distributed among the armrest, the footrest, and the back. So if you remember your sines and cosines, if you sit a patient back 45 degrees, roughly half of that component would be transferred to the back. So when we talk about other products later in other videos, reclining backrests are a great advantage in reducing pressure on cushions, not only big advantage for positioning a resident. So I kind of use as an example over here. This gray shaded area, I'm using as an example, would represent a typical surface area that the patient is enveloping in a cushion. So for example, if they sat on an air or a gel or a water cushion, you would increase the surface area that they're enveloping. And if you look at some of the statistics, and this is in the enclosure, you can reduce the pressure by increasing the area, in this case 30%. Of course, that 30% is a variable. It depends upon the cushion, depends upon the anatomy of the resident, and also depends upon their bone structure. So let me just mention a few things about pressure tests. Very frequently, manufacturers will quote they have pressure readings below 33 millimeters of mercury. And by the way, this 33 millimeters of mercury is not cast in concrete. It's just an average number. And it was developed many years ago and is really not a very good guideline, but it's still being used today. So that if we provided you pressure readings, or any manufacturer showed you comparative pressure readings, you really can't believe them unless they talk about a comparison of two cushions. So when we talk about a comparison of two cushions, for example, the results would vary with the weight of the resident. If you had a 200-pound resident versus a 100-pound resident, the results would be grossly different. If you had a resident with a large backside versus a skinny resident with a small anatomy, you're changing the area, so the results are changing. So the only true test is really a comparative test between two companies. So this is what we call a gel foam cushion. This happens to be one of our very high volume products. Not the highest volume in a hospital. In a few minutes I'll show you some of the highest volume products. But this is a cushion that's comprised of foam in the bottom and gel on the top. And the advantage of gel, as I just mentioned before, is its cooling feature. The disadvantage of gel is that if you have a patient who's unstable in the upper trunk area, the gel moves back and forth. So that resident is a little bit unstable. That's the reason why we developed other cushions that are comprised of gel, but have separations of compartments. So I'm about to show you just one example of a gel cushion that has separations for added stability. And then I'm going to give you show you a product that has a pommel that is designed really for anti-sliding out of a wheelchair. This is a sample of the Stability Plus cushion, and it has the gel partitioned in 4 separate sections, so you can see how a resident who's a little bit unstable has a more stabilized gel platform. So this would coincide with the pommel area and also aids in preventing sliding, and this would correspond to the coccyx area. And this is not a high volume product, but later again, when you start dealing with therapists, it would be of more interest to you. When we start dealing with positioning in a wheelchair, this is our slide guard cushion. So this cushion serves the function of preventing one from sliding. It also provides leg abduction in the event that one has hip surgery. So you can see it's a gel platform, but it has the added feature of the slide guard. Very good nursing home product. Again, this is not one of the high volume hospital products. In about a moment, I'll start showing you some of the high volume products in the hospital. And admittedly, not the best cushions, but as I said before, the rule of thumb in the hospitals is that they want something that's disposable and very, very inexpensive. So a little background about cushions in hospitals. Prior to about a year ago, decubitus ulcers were a profit center in a hospital. What I mean by that is if you as a patient would develop pressure sores in the hospital, the government would then pay for cure of the pressure sores. And sometimes that cost can add up to several thousands of dollars. And just recently, the government passed a regulation that if a pressure sore is formed in a hospital, that's the hospital's responsibility. So now the hospitals take pressure sores a lot more responsibly and more seriously. So our highest volume cushion in a hospital happens to be this air cushion. And this is kind of a copy of an EHOP cushion. And I would say that the reason why it's probably the highest volume product in the hospital is because EHOP did a very fine job of marketing the cushion. So I'd just like to talk about a few differences between our cushion and the EHOP. Basically, we just use slightly thicker vinyl, but it's functionally the same. Very few differences, which is what the hospital wants. Really, the hospital doesn't want to have to make a decision and determine what the differences are. Now, Gamar came out with their version of the product, which is now owned by Stryker, and it's basically the same cushion without holes cut out. Quite frankly, it's the same cushion, so functionally they operate the same. Now, what kind of selling points do you have? We have a report that's in your pile, and we did a test between the SkillCare cushion and the Stryker cushion and the EHOP cushion. And this was done by a responsible laboratory, and we got better results. Now the question is, why did we get better results? The reason being is that what we did was we kind of engineered backwards. We determined how much is the proper amount of air in the cushion to get the best readings. So what we did was we maximized the results based on the air. So for example, these two products are not filled to the, I should say the Gamar and the HEOP variation is not filled to the proper amount. And what we do is we fill it to a perfect height so that we get the best pressure readings. Again, that report is in the pile. Okay, now what I'm about to tell you may not make sense to you, but the hospitals prefer receiving the cushions pre-filled. So what we call our air lift cushion, which is comparable to the HEOP cushions, it has a valve. But quite frankly, none of the hospitals want to fool around with the air, and they don't even buy pumps. And quite understandably, you may require a different amount of air for different patients, different barometric pressure, different elevations, like Denver would be a different, different geometry, but they don't change these things. They just buy them pre-filled and they use them as is. Strangely enough, we call this the airlock cushion, doesn't have a valve. So there is no ability to change the amount of air once they receive it, but that's the way they want it. Now, some of the hospitals prefer the one without the valve because in theory you could sit on a valve and it could be a source of pressure source. But I have to say we sell an equal amount of both cushions, and I like to emphasize we sell hundreds and hundreds to one hospital on a monthly basis. The volume is astonishing. Just to follow up on comparative tests, SkillCare gained a lot of credibility when they did a comparison test between our cushion and a J cushion. J, many years ago, was the most widely known and most accepted cushion among the therapists. So there's a Dr. Steven Spriegel. In those days, he was at the University of Buffalo, and he kind of said to me, he says, if you could design a cushion that has the equal or better results of the J cushion, but at a far lower cost, he said, you commit a miracle in the industry. So we ended up accomplishing that. So basically, the cushion that we provided in the test was a gel foam cushion, but it had on the bottom a leveling pad, and the purpose of the leveling pad is to eliminate the hammock in a wheelchair. Now that particular line of cushions are called our ultra cushions. Again, these are not high volume cushions. I'm just showing you this for the theory. And the results of that test are in the literature that is already provided to you. The last cushion I'd like to show you is our Cushion Air. And this is a rubberized cushion that is filled, and is very, very similar to the Roho cushion, and is also an alternative company called Star. What SkillCare brings to the market is our prices are much, much lower than Roho, and the results are pretty much equal to the Roho results. But a big advantage is, for some reason, Roho provides a cover that is not waterproof. So if you had it incontinent resident, the urine would seep into the cushion. It's very difficult to clean. So our cover has got a white, clean, stretch cover. So I'd like to summarize. Although we have 15 variations of cushions, the cushions that we recommend you start out with are the 2 air cushions and our Cushion Air, which I just showed you. They are color-coded, which is of great advantage, and they come in variations of sizes based upon the color. So the other cushions were shown primarily for theory, but later on they'll be more important to you when you start working with rehab nurses. Our next category of products will be gait belts. I'd like to start off with the purpose of gait belts. Historically, they found out that one of the greatest costs in hospitals happens to be employee workman's compensation. Very, very often the caregiver falls when they're ambulating, help ambulating the patient, and they fall with the patient. So it was determined that when a gait belt went around the resident, if the caregiver would hold the gait belt with their hand, and depending upon the weight of the patient or the degree of ambulation, you may have two caregivers, one holding on either side. But using a gait belt, it reduced the number of falls among the population of caregivers. So, greatly reducing the cost of workman's comp. So all the gait belts are high volume. So I'd just like to go over some categories. Historically, the gait belts were originally in cotton, and to date, the cotton variations do sell the highest volume. And they come in two different variations. They come with a metal buckle, and they also come with a plastic side release Delrin buckle. They're both equally as effective, and they both could hold, upwards of 350, 400 pounds. They come in different sizes, 60 inches, 72 inches for bariatric residents. They come in a variety of designs. We even have a stars and stripes, and we have regular striped. The reason for the variety of designs in gait belts is that the caregiver actually wears the gait belt, and then when they need to apply it to the resident, they take it off their waist and they put it on the resident. So the caregiver is somewhat interested in how they look, so they are interested in a variety of colors and designs. All of the designs sell well. So I'd just like to cover some variations of gait belts. So as I mentioned before, they come in a Delrin buckle and they come in a metal buckle. We have lightweight cotton, heavyweight cotton. The lightweight cotton holds as much weight as the heavyweight cotton. It's more of a marketing theme that manufacturers developed to imply that the heavyweight can handle a larger or heavier resident. The other variable is we have something called a PathoShield gait belt. Now the cotton gait belts can be laundered, but they really can harbor bacteria. So in the last several years, the hospitals became more sensitized to bacteria. So if you look at this is actually sewn over here. You can't see the stitching, but it's stitched. The PathoShield consists of a cotton underlining, and it's completely coated in vinyl. But the important point is there's no stitching on here. It's all fused. And that really differentiates Skilled Care from our competitors. Most of our competitors who do use a vinyl coated webbing actually stitch the belt. So those openings harbor bacteria. Well, we have, I think, the only gait belt, the only PathoShield gait belt without any stitching. We just introduced an economy version, and basically the cotton is launderable, and this is a polypropylene. So the only difference is it can handle the same weight, it just is not launderable. So to summarize, all the gait belts are high volume, and we sell the equal amount of metal and plastic. The PathoShield is not anywhere sold in the volume of the cotton, but it's still a very, very important hospital item. In this section, we'll cover restraints. First, I'd like to define what restraint is. Restraint is a relative term. What I mean by that is it's any product that confines a resident to a wheelchair or bed and prevents them from moving their limbs or getting out of the bed or the wheelchair. And why do I say it's a relative term? For example, you could have a patient who cannot manipulate a buckle that's, let's say, badly arthritic, and then you may have a patient who has very flexible fingers and can remove a particular buckle. Using an extreme case, you may have a quadriplegic, so every product is considered restraint for that resident. In addition, restraints vary by the time of the day. So for example, in the morning, you may have an alert resident, and they can manipulate a product and get out of it, and it's not a restraint. Later in the day, when they're tired, it becomes a restraint. So it's a relative term, as I mentioned before. So let's define the three categories of restraints. When the J.T. Posey company came up with restraints, their primary function was to refrain somebody from leaving a wheelchair or a bed. But as time went on, we developed and they developed restraints so that not only did they confine somebody from leaving a wheelchair, but they also help position a resident. And then we'll see that when I show some examples. And by the way, you can see how restraints became a segue for skilled care developing positioning devices. So let me start off with the control point chart. Going back 35 years ago when I started analyzing the Posey restraints, it became clear to me that a lot of restraints had a lot of redundancy in function. So for example, if you look at a restraint when I start demonstrating them, you'll find out that they really only control the resident where the strap is. So for example, I'm going to show this is what's commonly called a poncho restraint. And it's a poncho because it's open on the sides. So it only restrains the resident around the waist, and in this case, around the shoulders. So we could see how if you put a strap across the shoulders, it would prevent the resident from falling forward or leaning from side to side. And showing the redundancy, Posey comes up with another design. Comes up with something that looks like in this case, it's a vest. Again, it has a waist strap, and then it has a strap across the shoulder. So it controls the resident around the waist and around the shoulders. So what I then did was I created a spreadsheet, and I listed all the products and where they control you. So you'll see there's a lot of redundancy. So for example, I'm going to show you, and this is included in the packet, is the control point chart. So you can't see it from here, but you can see it in your packet, the following columns. These are the control point combinations. So for example, let's look at the chart. Control point number 1, I just arbitrarily called across the shoulders, 2 the chest, 3 the waist, 4 the crotch. So obviously, if you had a strap across the shoulders, that prevents the resident from falling forward or leaning from side to side. The chest also prevents you from falling forward. The waist strap would remind you from getting out of the wheelchair, prevent you from getting out of the wheelchair. And anything across the crotch would prevent you from sliding out of a wheelchair. So you can see how a vest or a poncho can have 1 or 4 of these straps, and depending upon what strap it has, it controls the appropriate area. Then I went here is, coincidentally, when Posey designed restraints, he thought all the restraints worked perfectly and prevented you from getting out of the wheelchair or the bed. In reality, it wasn't the case. So then he went on and started designing other restraints that were more difficult to get out of. So then I broke the restraints up into another category, the degree of difficulty of getting out of. So in this column, you'll see mild restraints are those products that are somewhat difficult to get out of, and in high degree of restraint, they're very, very difficult to get out of. Now, I don't know if you can't see from there, but if you see a whole cluster of numbers, all these products do the same thing. They only control you around the waist. And similarly, these products control you at the upper body and the body waist. So it's really a great confusion by the nurses as to which product to use. So they just end up using what they're used to using before. So this became very helpful to the nursing community. It allowed them to choose one product and not have duplication of products. So I'm just going to show you some examples. So when I mentioned the vest restraint, notice that this is a khaki or a brown color. And then this is blue. The first column is non-restrictive. So really what happened was a lot of the nurses were saying, look, we want a restraint, but we don't want to over-restrain them. So why don't you design a product that has a self-release? So we really jumped ahead of Posey in this area, started duplicating the restraints, but kind of manufactured them with belts and Velcro so that the patient could remove them if they wanted to. So here is a cushion belt that is control point number 3, and it has a Velcro closure. And then, interestingly, a lot of nurses said, hey, that's great. We want the patient to get out, but not too easily. So we then developed a buckle that is not considered a full-blown restraint, has a side release buckle, but unless you have strength in your fingers, you really can't open it. So bingo, the nurses loved it. They said, hey, it doesn't look like a restraint, but it's more difficult to get out of. So we have 4 different closures. We have Velcro, and then we have Velcro with a loop. In case you're arthritic, you can put your hand through the Velcro. And then we have a cam release buckle. So we have the varying closures because they're varying degrees of difficulty of removing. Just one other factor regarding restraints. All of the non-restrictive or the least restrictive devices have simple ties to the wheelchairs. As you'll see over here, it's a simple loop. It straps around. This is called the kick spur. And then this would go in front of the resident. And then you have an adjustable slide buckle here that adjusts the length. The restraints are all tied out of the reach of the resident. So the nurses prefer to use something called a slip knot, which can be released very, very quickly in case of an emergency. So I'll just demonstrate it slowly. Place it around the kick spur. And then in case of an emergency, you just pull it out. It releases immediately. It's not important that you know how to tie it, but it's important to know that when you do tie it, the nurse is supposed to use an easily removable knot. The present regulations state that you should use the least restrictive device on the resident so that these products, and if you'll notice these are blue again, and the full restraints are brown, are the ones that they use first. And then if the resident gets out of easily or they can cause harm to themselves, then they go to restraint. The problem with restraints is that most facilities try to minimize use of restraints, and you also require a doctor's script for restraint. So basically the theory is to use the least restrictive device. One minor point is there's a ruling out there that says you cannot double restrain a resident. What does that mean? So you cannot use 2 products that are restraints, but also a jerry chair is considered a restraint. So in a hospital, it is against regulations to use any restraint on a jerry chair. And the reason why a jerry chair is considered restraint because the resident can't ambulate the jerry chair. So all these products are really applied primarily to wheelchairs. Okay, now that you know the theory about restraints, I'm going to talk about those products at a highest volume. Now, Posey does sell a lot of these products, but what's the highest volume are basically the mitts. The function of a mitt is really to prevent the resident from either pulling out IV tubes, scratching themselves, or harming other residents. So this is a simple padded mitt, and it has finger separation. The reason why we have mesh is that the nurses want to be able to inspect the skin to make sure that there's still good circulation. Now, every restraint that comes, or I should say every padded mitt, has a strap. And this strap I could take out. And this strap is tied to the mitt, and you have the opportunity then to tie the limb to the bed rails. A lot of facilities are doing that after an operation and they undergo anesthesia. So if they pull out their tubes, it could be life-threatening. So it actually acts as a mitt and a limb holder. So I'll just go through some of the variations of high volume mitts. So this is a finger separator mitt, very high volume. If you put a mitt on, you'll notice the finger separation serves the purpose is that the resident can't rotate the hand in the mitt. Now the theory is when you have this mitt on, you can't grab IV tubes or you can't scratch yourself. That's the theory. In practice, if you bend your hand down like this, I could actually, let's assume this hand is not has a restraint on it, I could actually use my fingers. So that even though this is a high volume product, we came out with another variation that has a rigid component. It's a board knit. So when your hand is placed in this, you really can't bend your fingers. So these are all launderable. This plastic board comes out prior to laundering. I'm going to now talk about limb holders. I'll be demonstrating two limb holders. Basically, we have a synthetic sheepskin limb holder, and then we have a foam limb holder. They both serve the same function. For whatever reason, the foam one is a higher volume one, only because it's been in circulation for many more years, but quite frankly, I think the synthetic sheepskin one does everything this one does, and it's a lot better. And basically, a limb holder goes around the wrist. It's tied with a buckle, and there are two variations. Some of them have one strap that ties to one of the side rails. Some of them, as this one does, has two straps. So it really limits the mobility of the limb. Now be aware, these could be used for the hands or the wrists or for the legs. And similarly, you have the foam limb holder does the same thing, but you can see this is the single strap version. Now, these are both considered disposable products, and they're priced, even though this is superior and can be laundered, it is disposed of in a hospital, and they're approximately the same price. We now cover transfer pads. One of the largest expenses in hospitals happens to be workman's comp claims because of back injury. The caregiver, when handling the resident, often bends over, and when they lift a heavy weight, they hurt their back. So when they'd like to transfer a resident out of the bed, very often they use the bed sheets, but what happens is the bed sheets rip and they don't hold much weight. So we developed a whole line of transfer pads, and I'd like to demonstrate them now. This particular transfer pad happens to be what we call our four-handle version. So it lies on the bed, and I just want to show you the opposite side. You can see it's reinforced with webbing. So we could hold very high weights. I mean, we have specific weight limits on our website, but this particular one holds probably about 250 pounds. And you'll notice it's nylon, but it's a double layer nylon. So it's used primarily to be placed under the resident and when the caregiver wants to lift them. So it could be used for lifting. By the way, it's not recommended to keep under the resident when you're not using it because of the double thickness and the webbing. It could cause some irritation. Now, when we start talking about the bed position systems, we also have slide sheets associated with them. Now, these slide sheets are used for sliding but not lifting. And they can and should be placed under the resident, and it's not incorrect to be using it all day under the resident. And then when you want to slide them, you just slide them. They do have handles that are continuously located on the backside, and it is waterproof. So both of these products are waterproof, do not allow penetration of fluids. Now, talking about slide sheets and transfer pads, they come in a host of different sizes. We have bariatric sizes, and we have just normal 38 by 50 sizes. And you'll notice in the literature, the transfer pads come with 4-handle, 6-handle, 8-handle. Another product that we developed that's in very high demand is what we call a TLC pad. It is really designed for sliding and repositioning. So it has a nylon back, so it has a low friction surface, so it's easy to slide the resident. You can see we have 4 handles, and then we have actually 3 layers. The top layer, which is what we call cozy cloth, is very soft and doesn't cause shear forces on the skin. There's a middle layer that you cannot see. That is a foam material that it helps prevent pressure sores, and it's very comfortable. And then the third layer, of course, is the nylon that is waterproof, doesn't allow penetration of fluids. So this product is used for positioning, and the resident can lie on it all day, and then you just slide them as need be. This transfer pad is not a high volume pad, but it's important to know about because in the event the hospital is using a low air loss mattress, the question will come up, do you have a transfer pad that allows the air to flow through? So this is a mesh pad that has the same features and benefits as the nylon pads, and it has handles on it, as you can see. And it slides along the bed. It doesn't slide as easily as the nylon, but it does solve the problem of when used on a low air loss mattress. So again, it's not high volume, but it's good to know about. I'd like to cover now the jerry sleeves. The jerry sleeves come in either a light beige color or a darker brown color. They have a padded or an unpadded variety. And then they have an opening for the thumb, and they're placed on the arm, and they help prevent abrasion. We also have a version for the leg, which is similar to this, and it's just sized differently. These products are launderable, and they're very, very high volume in hospitals and in all nursing facilities. I'd like to cover now fall mats. When we first developed the first fall mats in the industry, they were 4 inches thick, and they were not really able to fold. And as time went on, our competitors priced mats at a lower price by coming up with a 2-inch mat. So we then had to come up with a 2-inch mat. Then as further time went on, we had competitors that came up with a 1-inch mat. So we had to kind of follow the cycle down. So unfortunately, we have a lot of variations of fall mats, but I'm going to demonstrate the most economical and the 2 highest volume fall mats that we have. The first one is what we call Safe and Sound. This is a new introduction to our line, and I'll cover some of their salient features. It has a non-skid bottom. It has a beveled side, so you don't trip on it when walking on it. It has a very stable shock-absorbent foam, and very importantly, it's very easy to clean. It has a very, very durable vinyl. And these products, by the way, when they're stored, they store, generally speaking, under the bed. But what SkillCare came up with a strap. So our strap goes around the device, and then you store it on the footboard. So we are the only ones in the industry that actually have a strap that stores the pad on the footboard. And the reason for that is when they're cleaning the floor, they don't want to soil these mats. So it's very, very important. Okay, this Safe and Sound floor mat comes in either a folding or a non-folding version. But as I mentioned, this can be stored on the footboard of the bed with the strap that is included with the product. So it's a double loop strap. So one loop, as you can see, goes around the floor mat, and the other loop goes around the footboard. So the The advantage of this is to be able to store this on the footboard above the floor, so when they're cleaning the floor, it remains clean and bacteria-free. Another version of the fall mat happens to be what we call our easy landing. The big difference between this and the other mat, this is a molded mat, and it's quite resilient and it's easy to clean. Now, this does not come in a folding version, but it rolls up when you store it. I can't really say one is better than the other. It turns out what happens in the market is that people buy what they used to buying. So if they buy a molded version, they want this one. If they buy a non-molded version, they want the safe and sound version. But skilled care prices are very, very competitive, and these are very high volume products in the hospital. We're now going to cover heel protectors. As I mentioned earlier in the video, traditionally the line that sells the most are basically the lowest cost. So for example, if you talk about cushions, I mentioned the air cushions were the lowest in cost, sold a lot higher volume than the better cushions that had the gel. The only exception happens to be the heel protectors. We have heel protectors that are synthetic sheepskin, foam only, and then we have convoluted foam, but the ones that are really high volume are what we call the heel float series. So this is what we call the Heel Flow 2, and we'll talk about some features and benefits. When the heel is placed in, it actually offloads the heel, so there's zero pressure on the heel. We have a soft fabric, which is cozy cloth, so it minimizes abrasion. And then, very interestingly, we have a strap arrangement. Since the nurses really couldn't come to a conclusion as to where the strap should be placed, we have a variable strap arrangement. So for example, we have a strap that goes over here, and this strap can move back and forth, and it could be placed over here, or it could be placed over here. So you can see how we have two variations. Also, a very important point, a lot of competitors have straps that have Velcro that's in contact with the skin. You'll notice our Velcro is on the outside, so when this goes through the loop and then there's a back strap, the Velcro is on the top, and the soft, cozy cloth is in contact with the skin. So again, this is the Heel Flow 2. It has foam that offloads the heel. Not shown here because we don't believe it's going to be as high volume in the hospitals, is another version that has gel in it. But the Heel Flow 2 is the one that I would show in the hospitals. A super soft heel protector. Now this particular one is lined with foam on the inside. This heel float, I call it heel float, but it's really called a super soft heel protector, is filled with polyfill. Very similar to what you would have in a pillow. Again, the heel is offloaded, very soft. And by the way, both products are launderable. So both high volume products in the hospital. Now, just a point to mention, your biggest competitor is probably going to be a company called Sage. So our prices are lower than theirs, and their products are not even launderable, but because of their great marketing, they do have great penetration in the hospitals. We have an accessory available that is placed on the bed, and when the foot is placed in here, it stabilizes the foot. Now, this is important in a situation if you have hip surgery, you want to immobilize the leg. So it's not high volume, but it's very, very nice to show because it sells very well. And it can be used for either one of the two heel protectors, but it's more effective with this one because this has more grab into it. A major problem in the United States is obesity, and with obesity, comes diabetes. And with diabetes, we're talking about very poor circulation. So in many situations, a resident cannot tolerate a heel float or any product on the heel. So the problem is, how do you offload the heel without placing foam or fabric in contact with the foot? So this is called the heels off. It's a block of foam. It is high volume, and the heel is placed over it, and it's offloaded in this area. So you'll notice that you could fit 2 feet on this, and it comes in 2 different sizes. This is the smallest size, and it comes in a bariatric size. The 2 products I'm about to demonstrate are more for historical purposes, and they actually provided a segue into the bed system. But I thought you'd find the background somewhat interesting. Going back about 28 years ago, we discovered there was a problem with pressure sores in the bed, whereas no mattress really solved the problem. So you had to maintain a resident's position on this side. So we came up with a product called a roll control bolster. It consists of 2 bolsters, and with straps on the side, it attaches to the bed. And with 2 center straps, you can adjust the distance. You can have it closer or further away. So in a close position, you would maintain a resident on their side. And as we mentioned from the National Pressure Ulcer Council, they recommended left side, back, right side. And it was a very, very popular product, and it still is a popular product, but primarily in the long-term care market. So then we had one objection, that you had straps that you were lying on the straps. So we came up with a solution for the straps. So the evolution from the roll control bolsters was a product we call the in-bed patient positioning system. So it consists of 2 bolsters at a 30-degree angle. We provided Velcro on the inside, and this particular TLC pad has a loop material. So when the resident leans against it, it mates together. It stabilizes this particular bolster. As you can see that it's Velcro together. So this is still a very popular item in the long-term care market. But so far, I'd like to explain, these are not high-volume products in the hospital. So then a company called Sage saw this product, and they had their R&D department come along, and they did some research and duplication, and they duplicated this product, but they really dumbed it down. So what they did was, they did not use something as good as this TLC pad. They came up with 2 bolsters. As a matter of fact, they didn't even cover their bolsters in vinyl. Basically, they have a piece of foam with some vinyl glued to one face, so it's actually a disposable item. And then they use those pads, those transfer pads that I demonstrated before. All right, so they developed a system very much like the in-bed patient position system, and it's a double stretch fabric that lies on top of 2 wedges, and we have variations. One variation has 2 wedges, one has 1 longer wedge, and as I mentioned, we have one with a Velcro, as we have here, and selling equally is no Velcro. The advantage of Velcro, obviously, it's a more stable system. The advantage of no Velcro, it's easy for the nurses because they don't have to undo Velcro. But these bed systems are very, very high volume products because they've been pre-marketed by Sage. I provided a demonstration of these 2 products just to give you a sense of the history of these products. And remember, these products have been out there on the market for about 28 years. So Sage came out with a product about 5 years ago based on the in-bed patient position system. And it's nothing more than a slide sheet that goes over a bunch of wedges. So when after this particular portion of the video, we're going to demonstrate the actual high volume systems, which are our positioning systems at 30-degree wedges. I'd like to now cover in-bed patient positioning systems. If you look at the National Pressure Ulcer Committee notes, which is included in the literature I sent to you, they talk about alternating a resident if they're prone to pressure sores. So in other words, have them lie on a 30-degree to 40-degree wedge and alternate them between the left side, the center, on their back, and then the right side every 2 hours. As time went on, Sage knocks us off, comes up with another variant because of their great marketing ability. They did not copy the roll control bolster, but they copied a variant of the in-bed patient position system. So basically, any of these positioning systems consist of 30-degree wedges and different models. One has 2 wedges, one model has 1 wedge. Now this particular model has Velcro that affixes to this. This is a loop material. So when this is placed in the bed, the wedges don't move. We sell a lot of it. And then we approached the hospital groups, and then some of the hospitals asked us for the same or a similar product, but without Velcro, where the transfer pad just fits over the bolsters. So I have to say both models sell very well, with Velcro and without Velcro. It all depends upon the nurse's preference. So all I could say is when you talk about the product, just say you have a lot of variations with Velcro and without Velcro. As a matter of fact, we're going to include in the packet a list of all the components associated with these bed pads. So it comes in different sizes, and it'll tell you the size of the bolsters, the size of the transfer pads, and we have, as I showed before, nylon sheets, we have mesh sheets. Very, very high volume product. And I can't even point out which is the highest volume because we just sell a lot of with Velcro and without Velcro. So when we covered the transfer pads before, I showed you this particular transfer pad. So I just want to emphasize the fact that it has handles underneath, and this particular pad can be placed under the resident for long periods of time. It's comfortable, and it is waterproof for incontinent residents. I'd like to now talk about mattresses, but before we talk about the specific mattresses you're going to sell, I'd like to give you a little primer on foam and mattresses. Foam basically is a hydrocarbon filled with a lot of air, so that the better the foam, the more expensive the foam, the more hydrocarbon and the less air. So a gimmick used by a lot of manufacturers is to drive down the cost by using foam that has a lot of air in it. And I'll demonstrate how you can tell a good mattress from a bad mattress. So I have over here is a typical competitive type mattress. And basically what you would do is when you try to sell a mattress, if they show you a competing mattress, you just compress the foam. And I don't know if you can see it, but I can compress this down to about 1/2 inch. And what that indicates is that this has a lot of air and very little hydrocarbon, very little foam. And the reason why I'm showing 3 layers is that a lot of mattress manufacturers throw in a middle layer. It looks great in the catalog, but in reality it's just filler foam. So if you look at this foam I can compress to almost nothing. This is all air, very little foam. And we're throwing on a lot of mattresses use convoluted foam. Convoluted foam really is half the amount of foam, and this is probably the lowest quality foam. So this would not represent a good mattress. Again, you give it the compression test, take your thumb and your forefinger, you'll see you can compress it. And when you demonstrate that, it indicates a poor quality foam. Now, why is a soft foam bad for the end user? Quite frankly, when you lie on a soft foam, it feels good, feels comfortable. But the downside is, in a period of about 6 months to a year, the foam bottoms out. And what do I mean by bottoms out? it forms a permanent deformation. It's not resilient enough, it doesn't come back. The other biggest problem is that when the resident lies on the side of the mattress, it compresses too much and they roll out. Now, here's a gimmick that a lot of manufacturers use, and you'll really understand why they're doing this. So if they're using a poor quality foam, they start throwing in marketing features, and they say, well, we have high density foam on the edge. Once they have a ledge, an anti-roll edge, you know that they're compensating for low quality soft foam that they roll out of. Now this high density foam really is of no value because you can roll right over it. So having said that, there are two categories of mattresses. There's the regular mattress and then what we call a perimeter guard. A perimeter guard was designed really to prevent rolling out. In reality, it's just a marketing ploy. We do sell a reasonable amount of perimeter guard, but the perimeter is, generally speaking, a 1 inch high. Skilled Care employs a 2 inch high perimeter. If we went to something that was more effective, 5-6 inches, as we do with our 30-degree wedges, we would not be priced competitively. So we use 2 inches where most people use 1 inch. But our foam is a very, very high density, good quality foam. And I'll show you comparison. I'm pressing this down pretty hard. And you can see it's not really giving that much. Now, we use 2 layers of foam. The bottom layer is very high density. It's very high density because it's in contact with either an inner spring or what they call a hard pan. So we want to make sure it doesn't break down, especially against the inner spring. The top is about a 1.85 density foam, but very resilient, and you can really get a sense of good foam. You can feel it's nice and spongy. It's got a good feel to it. Now, the reason why we use cubes is earlier in the video we talked about shear forces. Now, when you talk about forces, you generally talk about a perpendicular force. But what happens is when you're lying on something and you give it a parallel force or shear force, studies have said that that exacerbates the causation of pressure sores. So that they even say it doubles the possibility of getting a pressure sore. So that if you have, let's say, a pressure of 35 millimeters of mercury, and in parallel you get shear forces, that's equivalent to 70 millimeters of mercury of pressure, which would almost assuredly cause pressure sores. So the squares, when the body is lying on the squares, instead of rubbing against the foam, the body is moving back and forth. I'll do it on an end cube. So it's the foam that's moving back and forth, but it is not the skin that is actually shearing. We broke the foam into different sizes. You can't see the above, but in the center we have most of the weight from the trunk area. The squares are larger. In the lower area we have less weight, namely the heel area, and we have it from the whole left to right. It's a smaller square. Now, what does the smaller square do? It effectively reduces the density of the foam because there's more space and less foam. So this is really a much softer feel than you have over here. But having said that, even as effective as this foam is, in most cases you have a diabetic resident, you still need one of those offloading heel protectors. Now let's talk about the construction of a mattress. All mattresses by law have to have a fiberglass sock. So in reality, the sock would come over the end and then it's closed. We then use a waterproof cover, and it's a wipe clean cover, and it stretches. So this also minimizes shear forces. So when you purchase a mattress from Skilled Care Corporation, we provide 1 or 2 covers. We have what we call a low shear 2 cover or a nylon cover. I think this cover is more effective and better for the resident, but nylon lasts a little bit longer. So we do have 7-year non-prorated mattresses. guarantees on the mattresses. Now, this is one variant of the mattress. Another mattress, which I'm not demonstrating, and I'll explain why in a minute, is we call this the pressure check mattress. So the top, this other variant, the top layer, is going to have a visco foam with a gel infusion in it. Now, according to the studies, is that this gel infusion lowers the skin temperature. And before, early in the video, I said that if you raise the skin temperature 1 degree centigrade, you have a greater propensity, actually they say 8 to 12% greater propensity of getting pressure sores. So this gel-infused visco foam will be coming into the line in about 3 months. Now, some good news. Now, right now we manufacture all the mattresses, but we contacted a company in China, actually the largest manufacturer of foam mattresses, we think, in the world, who is very anxious to do business with. So they're giving us some very, very competitive pricing on this mattress, and then we will be getting in these gel-infused mattresses probably in 3 to 4 months. So it takes 3 to 4 months to do a sale. What we'll try to do is get samples of that and then distribute to all the reps blocks of this mattress and the other mattress. So the pricing that you got now on a mattress is going to be low. It's going to be lower substantially. In terms of mattresses, those mattresses will be coming in rolled up in a fairly small box. So you being out on the West Coast or the western part of the country, shipping costs are a significant factor. So we'll get you specific shipping costs, for your area of the country. Okay, so I talked about this fiberglass cover. Now, specifically, this particular mattress meets all the required fire codes, which is CFR 1633. Directed for those of you who live in California, it's an interesting study. California had a very strict requirement called Cal 117B, and that was the code. And then they later discovered that if you put that additive in the foam to meet 17B, it was more toxic, it was killing a lot of people. So just talking about California, California has Prop 65. And Prop 65 basically says if you have one of 600 chemicals, you're required by law to say it can cause birth defects and all kinds of illnesses. So in reality, all skilled care products are going to have that label on it, because anything that is man-made, whether it's a drinking cup, whether it's foam, whether it's a vinyl, a plastic, any of the items you're wearing would not pass this 1 of 600 chemical test. Now, that's of course if you eat these items in large quantity, but that does not stop Prop 65. So anyway, don't be frightened if you see all our products labeled, specifically the mattress, talking about birth defects and all kinds of illnesses. In reality, that's a requirement for every manufacturer in the United States who sells into California. But since we do not know where our products are going to end up, we put it on every product. A niche category of mattresses are the psychiatric mattresses. Roughly speaking, there are about 232 psychiatric hospitals in the United States. Understandably, there are more psychiatric hospitals in New York than any other state. Some people think we're all crazy, but I'd like you to know that there are actually 2 more psychiatric hospitals in Kentucky. So go figure that one out. First, I'll give you the good news and then the bad news. The good news is once you get an order for psychiatric mattresses, they keep on repeating, and it's great insurance policy. The bad news is most of the psychiatric hospitals are state-run. So you've got to go through the paperwork, get on a bid list, and apply for psychiatric products. But just want to mention one other thing is that generally speaking, the prices for psychiatric mattresses are higher than the regular mattresses. So let me just talk a little bit about the psychiatric mattress physically. It's exactly the same as the pressure check mattress, and I'll open it up on this side. We left the cover open. We're using what they call a rip stock nylon because it's very strong. And the important feature is there are no zippers. In other words, completely sewn all around. So just open up this side, which we left for you. So as you can see, we have the same cell structure with the foam, and we have the fireproof fiberglass stockinette, and you can see the nylon cover open for your purpose, but in production this is completely enclosed, so the psychiatric community can't hide their goodies in there. Also, this is a very, very popular item in the prisons. So I don't know if any of you have contracts with any of the prisons. Okay, I'm now going to talk about a catheter leg strap. One of the most important things to know is the king of catheter leg straps is a company called Dale. So Dale has a similar device, but there is elastic in it, and it's relatively expensive compared to the SkillCare version. So this happens to be what we call Velfoam. It's got a Velcro material and it has foam on the inside. So the catheter leg strap goes around the leg and holds the catheter tube, which I'm not going to demonstrate the catheter, obviously. So I'm just going to show you that this stretches nicely, and you can see, so it actually serves the same purpose as the elastic, but it's a lot less expensive. It has a Velcro on the end. This can be cut off to any desired length, and it would go around the leg. And then there's a little Velcro tab here for the tube to go through. So it's placed around the leg, and it basically serves the function of holding a catheter tube in place around the leg. I'd like to talk about trach tube ties. SkillCare, as I mentioned, we developed over 600 unique products in the industry. And I'm sorry to say we can't take credit for these. These are probably Posey originated products. And not much to say about a trach tube tie other than there are different variations. There's a two-piece, as you can see. It attaches with Velcro, and it holds the trach tube in the neck area in place. And then there's another variation, slightly different, same function. It's also two pieces. And both of them have this thin strip of Velcro that goes around the trach tube to hold it in place. So both this and the catheter leg strap are very high volume products in the hospital. Well, we finished the products, and I'm no Steven Spielberg, but hopefully you learned a little bit. And based upon your request, we're more than happy to do more videos. I'd like to make one point. I used a lot of products for demonstration purposes, but when you get the video and you get the literature, we'll make it clear which of those products are the high volume products. And then I'd like to give you a word of encouragement. The big distributors, the Owens & Minor and the Cardinals, they're only interested really in the $100,000, $200,000 products. And they private label a lot of products, and they really ignore most of the products that you're about to sell. So cumulatively, there's an enormous amount of volume, and it's really untouched by your competitors. So good luck, and if you want more videos, we're happy to provide them. Thank you for the partnership. Another point is it's very difficult to sell a product without a sample, so we're more than happy to provide samples as needed, and just call SkillCare customer service. If there are any technical questions or you'd like questions about modifying a product, call Frank McNamee, extension 221, and myself, Steve Warren, at extension 209. If you have any questions about group purchasing, discounts off the pricing, that would be John DeVito. Thank you very much.